This is the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast, episode 193. Today's guest, Justin Sutton. We're going to be talking about how he went from the military, did a couple W-2 jobs, and then went full-time into real estate wholesaling and flipping houses, getting really good at creative finance, which we're going to be able to break down today, and then what he is building with the Continental Community that's going to be changing real estate communities for the better. But if you haven't listened to this show before, this is the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast, and my name is Chris Reichenbach, where I am documenting my journey in real estate and business, and also bringing on high-level investors to share their stories about how they built their businesses. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok, where I post my journey and deals that I'm doing at chris.reichenbach. That's chris.reichenbach. And we would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe to this show and share it, because that is the only way this show grows. So we would really appreciate that. Now, let's hop into the interview. All right, Justin Sutton, welcome to the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast. How are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. So I've been in the Continental Community. I've been super pumped to get you on because you've helped me through a couple different, legal things, creative finance things, and then real estate in general. So I'm super excited to kind of dive into your story and dive into your brain. And, how we met was one of my buddies. I was trying to figure out creative finance. I flipped a couple houses at this point, and he said, you got to meet my buddy, Justin. He's really good with the subject to stuff. And so we sat down and went from there. I joined the Divots and Deeds golf group that you and Ryan Hatley started. And then, now I'm in the Continental Community, one of the first 6, and we have seen so much value from that. And I said, all right, we got to get you on the podcast. But I want to kind of jump into your journey because I know you were in the military first. So, talk about what was the push to get into the military and what was that experience like?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. I'm super excited to chat. I've never been on a podcast before, so I'm excited that this is the first one with one of our teammates at TCC to be able to showcase not just what we talk about, but firsthand from someone that's experienced it.
No
but
pressure.
we'll try and catch. Yeah, right.
Thousands and thousands of listeners.
Right. Well, we're excited nonetheless. Whether there's one listener or 10,000 listeners, we're only trying to talk to one person.
Right.
It feels like I feel like that's kind of been a part of what I've learned, like putting myself out there is like at all times you feel like you're probably only talking to one person because that's who's listening, right?
For sure.
But yeah, we'll catch people up to speed on kind of how we got to doing all that. So I was born up in Paducah, Kentucky. Lived up there for a few years. Family came down here to Charlotte in 1996. We moved to Fort Mill. Spent pretty much the majority of my life in York County. Moved away, and that's what kind of started the rest of my life, which got me into the military. I don't really know why I wanted to join the military. I knew that I really I love my country. I didn't like seeing some of the things that were going on, but I just wanted a job where when people looked at you, they were like, man, that guy's a badass. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was Army Rangers. So I went whenever I was working on an oil rig at the time, out in Indiana, and I was like, man, these guys you see on the commercials, they do some cool shit. I want to do some stuff like that. So I went down to the recruiter's office. They gave me the big spiel, and I signed an Army Ranger contract. I didn't want to do anything with real estate. I wanted to be coming up out of the water in swamps, taking people out from behind and stuff. There was a whole different trajectory of what I wanted. But then I broke my jaw on an oil rig. Ooh. And that got me disqualified through the surgeries and some of the medical stuff that came from that from the Ranger School. From there, I went into the Marine Corps. Had some life things happen and ended up getting a billet as a field radio operator, which we'll kind of see this as a common theme in some of my story, that I do a lot of things that set me up to be who I am today. Mm-hmm. But I never knew that the setbacks in those moments or the fields or the industries that I ended up in were actually going to play such a benefit. Looking back on it, communication is one of the biggest things that we put at the forefront of all of our businesses. And knowing that my first real career in the military and going forward was a field radio operator, where communications was mm-hmm. the forefront of my job and radio commands and stuff like that. So joined the Marine Corps, really enjoyed it. Had some medical issues where I blew out my knee a couple times. That was pretty hard set, and they kind of gave me an option to say, hey, we appreciate what you've done, but you're kind of broken now. We can't really, we can't use you like we intended to. And for anyone that's in the Marine Corps, they'll tell you that it's all about the needs of the Marine Corps. That's where they're going to put you. And they didn't have a need for someone that was going to be messed up and then have to do a lot of surgery and stuff. So they gave me a pretty sweetheart deal to kind of separate ties, but it was always kind of a bittersweet thing because I really, really wanted to have this kind of career path of eventually work my way into a special forces role and stuff like that. But it just didn't pan out that way, and it's okay
Yeah.
nowadays. But for a while it was kind of tough. So yeah, kind of got involved. I love the Marine Corps though. I love the camaraderie. Or the camaraderie. I love the kind of, we always had this thing where we would tell people like, I really, really miss the clowns.
Hmm.
Not so much the circus, but
Yeah.
I really, really miss the clowns, right? So like the guys and the stories and the things that you do in there were like, that was what it was all about. And
For
then
sure.
the circus was the circus, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I enjoyed my time, and it set me up for a lot of leadership stuff going into being an entrepreneur and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people that I've listened to that come out of the military, and whether they go into real estate or business or anything, they're super, super driven. They start doing those ultra marathons. What was the next step after that you pursued? Was it a normal job? Was it the real estate, or what happened after the military?
yeah, that was probably the figuring it out phase of my life in the sense that I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I ended up going back to school right away thinking like, oh, as long as I get a degree, like I'll be fine. Like I was um, super mainstream in my line of thinking of like
Yeah.
what a successful life was. Like I had a whole belief growing up that as long as I made $100,000 a year, like I did it. Like I made it. Like we
Oh
have
yeah.
money. Like you can do whatever you want. You can travel where you want. And like that's obviously not the case for those that have been exposed to that. But you really believe that's the system. So like going back to school was just a part of like that process. You get the good degree.
That's
You
that's what everybody does. It's like, oh,
yeah.
well, I don't know what to do, so I'll just go back and go to school.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and you feel like the paper is what's going to excel you, and like, and a lot of the things, like the social experiences that you get from college, are way more impactful than the actual paper that they give you the degree on. So I got a lot of cool stuff with that. I had no money. When I say no money, like constantly a negative balance in my account. I drove for Uber like 40 hours a week on top of going to school. I was driving from like 6 p.m. to like 6 a.m. in
Mhm.
Charleston, up King Street and dropping off drunk idiots and
Oh yeah.
college kids all the time and stuff. But I got to know this. I got to learn the city pretty well and meet people and use that communication skill again to just like have conversations. Just kind of part of kind of who I am. I like to talk to people, and looking back, it was just another way of kind of learning like how to talk to people even before they were completely obliterated, before they knew we were actually having a conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's such a skill, being able to talk to people in any type of different situation, because I mean, especially in real estate now, like you never know what you're walking
yeah.
into when you're talking to a seller, so you can definitely see how that, you know, led into the real estate part. But yeah,
Yeah, let me hit on that for just a second. I will go back into it a little bit, but like
for sure.
the big thing for communication for me and like the wanting to talk to people comes from a genuine curiosity standpoint of like, I'm just curious what you got going on, what
Yeah.
you're doing. It's like, it's almost nosy in a way, but like it's not from a judgmental standpoint. It's like, man, what are you doing to make money, right? Like I got this one guy we consider him like an ultra high net worth client. We don't do anything together yet, but we're getting
Yeah.
to know each other and stuff. And I'm having dinner with him one night, and he's telling me about this business he got into with like ATMs. And like he owns like 30,000 ATMs all over the nation. And this guy just approached him with an opportunity. And he's not in the ATM business. Like he has nothing to do with the ATMs, but luck and timing kind of set him up to be in the ATM business. And he's making like $1 million a month from this business that he really didn't know like had the capability to be in it. And he told me that, telling me like, hey, like who you think you kind of are today, like you could be presented with an opportunity and a relationship or something that could just change the trajectory of your life, and like you just kind of gotta be in the realm long enough that luck and timing comes true. And I just remember him thinking like at no point in his life did he ever think he would make $1 million a month from owning all these
Yeah.
ATMs, but also like now like he's really really involved in whatever that business strategy looks like going into the future with his team because it's so lucrative. So I say that to say that like that's where a lot of my curiosity comes from, is like having more conversations so I can learn things like that. I'm never going to be in the ATM business. I'm not going to drop
Yeah.
everything I'm doing to go start up a bunch of ATMs, because that's kind of more of a chasing the woman in the red dress kind of strategy, and that's just not really who we are. But it's also eye opening to know that like there's a lot of money out there from a lot of places we didn't know. And it just kind of helped with the backbone of like raising capital and doing things like that. But
Right.
I say that to hit on that because like a lot of like that skill comes from just like, I just want to know what people got going on, but not from a judgmental way, just from a what else is out there, what else is, can't drop everything you're doing and do it, but it's okay to be curious about
Yeah.
what's going on with others. Um,
Yeah,
but
this is such
yeah,
a
yeah.
cool story because that reminds me a lot of the Surrender Experiment. Have you ever read that book?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
Super cool. So, I mean, long story short, he's like this yogi out in the woods, and
Okay.
ends up building this like multi-million dollar tech business. And it was just like surrendering to whatever life goes, threw at him. And it was like those opportunities that kept showing up. So, it's cool to see that in other people's stories where they're pushing, they're pushing, they're pushing. Hey, this opportunity shows up and they're like, hey, that makes sense to me. And they start
Yeah.
moving in that direction. And that's kind of where we're getting into your real estate journey. So, jumping to that point, how did real estate find you?
Um, let me answer that a couple different ways. So during that time of trying to figure out the Uber and everything else, I knew I wanted to be successful. So like, there's this buddy that I had. His name was Cronin in the military, and the last 3 months while I was transitioning out, again, man, I was poor, like negative account. Like I didn't even have internet for my phone, so I had to go to the McDonald's up on base and use their
Mm-hmm.
free Wi-Fi. And I would sit here and I would just like, this has no relevance to my life now, but I would just watch Warren Buffett videos, and I would write down whatever Warren Buffett recommended. Like I would read that book or read that article, do it. Like I don't use any of that stuff in my life now, but it was that first step in the mindset of like, man, there's something more out there. But again, I was chasing a $100,000 a year position because I thought that was going to be like it. So like he used to watch me do this. He's like, why are you doing this? I'm like, I don't really know. I just know that like I'm supposed to be, and like it's
Yeah.
probably wrong, probably doing it all at the same time and all chaotically, but like I got to do something, right? And he used to give me a lot of credit for that, and I look back on it like that was kind of where it all kind of started, in the sense of like I was always chasing something, but just in a poor mindset of what my
Mm-hmm.
limits were and what my actual capabilities were. So as we did the Uber thing, and as I did construction jobs, and as life happened, like I was always trying to chase something more. So I was constantly looking up videos of like different ways to make money and stuff like that. And at one point I did watch a wholesaling video and I completely blew over it, and I was like, nope, not for me. Like I'll never do real estate. Um and then one of the jobs that I had after the military was I was working as a freight broker at TQL,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much a large scale corporate America company that brings in classes of 10 to 15 sales reps, puts them on the phone for 100 to 200 cold calls a day. They try to generate business from them, and the ones that can kind of make it through what they called a proving ground, which was like $6,000 in revenue for the company or something. And to give people an idea, it's like $100 to $500 spreads usually on like a deal. In that, when you book a load, it's usually $100 to $500 spread that you're earning. So 6K, while it's not unachievable, it's just like it is, it's a little bit of volume.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what this whole process was for the system. And it kind of sucks telling the story from my point of view, so it's always nice when he tells it. Have you seen The Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
Just
Yeah,
watched it actually.
yeah, yeah. They put it on Netflix. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. And do you know the scene when he goes into a Vesta Center and he sits down after he takes the job, and like everyone kind of
Oh yeah.
turns and watches him? Well, like I had the personality to like want to talk to people. Like I was just curious. So like
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation was just another day. Um, and he said that like the way, and again, it sucks telling it from my point of view,
Yeah.
but he said that like I sat down on my first day because we were all part of the same class, and I got on the phone with these truckers and these freight these, I can't remember, they're freight managers or logistics managers or shipping managers, whatever they referred to them at their company. I'd get on the phone with them and like just like fluid, like not,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, but like I was gonna just figure it out, and he said that they kind of all watched me in the sense of like, oh, who is this guy? Like he just started, like sat down, and like I crushed it at that job just because like I didn't care about making 100 to 200 calls a day. So I would finish the work that I had to do for the rep that I worked underneath, and then I would cold call all day. And like he watched this in real time for someone else, so he gets into wholesaling,
Mm-hmm.
and he leaves the job. He ends up getting a really, really bad draw on the person that he worked for and the way that he treated him. He was actually a really good worker, just ended up with a supervisor. It's the way they did like really low level supervisors that manage like 2 or 3 people, and then there was like 100 of those, and there's 4 managers that manage those 100. Like it was kind of a layered thing. So like he just luck of the draw got a bad one, but he liked me. He ends up leaving because of that, and he asked me if I want to do wholesaling, and this is like this is like November, the last week of November, right after Thanksgiving, in 2018. And he asked me, he's like, "You want to wholesale houses?" He's like, "We'll like get them, and then like we'll for cash, and like we'll sell them." And I'm like, "I don't got any money, dude." I was like, I was like, "We don't got no cash." I was like, "What do you mean?"
200 grand.
Yeah, I was like, "What do you? Yeah, that's not gonna happen." I was like, "Nah, man, that's probably not for me." He's like, "Dude," he's like, "with your skills, like you would be good at this. Like you should just look at it." And I was like, "Nah." To put into perspective my life at this point, I had um I had left that freight brokerage job for corporate America 101. One of the ways that you find is, I don't mean to go like super hard on this, but I kind of want to set the stage for what was a big turning moment in my life for coming into to real estate and really working for myself. Was the way that you would find leads for some of these freight brokers, and the way that I liked finding my leads was I would use Google satellites, and I would find massive warehouses out in the middle of like places like Chester and Pageland and places like this, and then I would call them and ask them who handled their shipping. And you'd have to do a lot of like cross-referencing within our database to ensure no one else at our 100,000 employee company didn't have them tagged already from doing this research 3 or 4 years ago and put them in the system, and then they get rights to market to them for so long, and then they can tag them over the years and stuff like that. So like my goal was to find people that weren't in our system and that were willing to just have a conversation with me, and we kind of take it from there. And one of the people that I had found was the material provider for the post office. So they provided like all the shirts, they provided all the bags, they made all the boxes of cardboard that the envelopes came in, that they shipped them in. So they weren't necessarily making the stuff that like the USPS was using, but in support of all their staff and how they did their stuff. And this was like a massive client. It was gonna be like $1 million a year client, and I was like, man, I did like, and I was working my ass off, like 6 to 6 every day for this corporate job, like hundreds of cold calls a day. Like this was gonna be how I made that 6 figures, right? So I get this, and like it was massive. It was gonna be like one of the bigger accounts they'd ever seen. And man, I worked my way up the chain of command with like local managers into like air control and air shipping stuff through like the post office. Ended up talking to like logistics managers in DC, and like these crazy conference calls that like I'm a 21-year-old kid like on the conference calls with like air freight control like in DC, of how they're gonna like be able to do this and vet us. And like my managers are on here wondering like how the hell this guy got us on this call. And I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like and like it was a massive deal. And about the time that it got time to ink that deal and kind of start making the money from it, one of like my really high ups in the boss I'd never talked to called me and said, "Hey man, we just want to really thank you for your hard work on this. We have John Doe, who's already actually working with the post office over here. So this is going to be a really good fit into his current team and model. But thank you for this. We're going to give you a bunch of customers that have reached out to us in exchange for in this. That way you get it." So I went from like $1 million a year client to like 100K a year. So now I had the 100K, but I had been exposed to the fact that I could have been making 10x that. Which hit really hard. So I took that pretty personally. And like the customers they sent me were like dumb. Like I was shipping like frozen chickens and couches and mattresses and stuff like from like Dallas to Pittsburgh, like all the time. Like just like weird stuff that wasn't really a money making it wasn't really a money making task within that role. And I remember thinking like, like I could probably just do something else for myself. Like I'm not happy in this corporate America. I'm a big golfer, which we can get into as well. Kind of how Divots and Deeds came to be. But like I was like, man, I'm gonna go back and work in the golf business. So I went back to working at a club. I was working on the bag drop and doing some like small lessons and stuff, but just trying to just be in golf again. Like, cause that's kind of where I was at before the military in corporate America. And that's kind of where I wanted to spend a lot of my life before the military. And I was like, yeah, let me get back into the golf side of things. And then he calls me with this wholesaling idea. So I'm getting married like 2 months after this. I get married in March of 2019. So I'm engaged to Annika at the time. And I have to call her and be like, hey, not only am I thinking about leaving another job after like I just left this other job because I got screwed over, but like this golf thing that I told you I was going to be really happy in, I'm going to leave it and I'm going to do this real estate thing that sounds kind of sketchy with a guy that I kind of know. I'm going to start it a few months before we get married, and like for the first 6 months of our marriage, like we may not make any money at all. What do you think? And for anybody that's
Yeah.
married or has a significant other out there, that's a hard call to make. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I support you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all the blessings to my wife. I love Annika more than anything. But one of the things that like she empowered us to do is like if she had said no, like we just wouldn't do this. Like we just wouldn't have done it. I would have just got a job, and like that would have been the thing. And it was too risky at the time because that was the mindset. But she tells everyone this day. She's like, I don't know. She's like, I heard real estate, and like real estate usually meant money. So like, why not?
Yeah. We got to get her on the podcast too.
She would have she's got one of the best stories I've ever heard. We just got to get her to share it. She has one of the best come ups I've ever heard of, from how she grew up in her childhood and the things she went through and stuff to what she's achieved now. Like it's a lot of the vast majority of our success is to her credit, because I don't run systems. I don't create systems. I talk to people. Like
yeah. So, but yeah, so you went through the W-2. You learned a ton, and it's like, hey, just this opportunity, this W-2 is not working for me. And I think a lot of people get to that point in the W-2 to where, the only reason for change is because there's enough pain. There's, two different types of pain, to where it's like, hey, I'm not making enough, or things get taken away from me. It sounds like that huge deal got taken away from you. It's like, well, what am I here for? Yeah. It's like, that would have secured me for a long time. And then there's also, that something that scares you into, it's like when there's a crazy illness in the family and somebody drops 150 pounds. So there's two different types of those pain points, and it sounds like the pain point for you, it's like, hey, they took away this massive client that was going to be bringing in a ton of money for me, and now it's like, where I could probably go somewhere else and do that. And then, with how you like talking to people on the phone, I mean, right, going into wholesaling, and especially during that time when, Bigger Pockets was around, but it wasn't necessarily like what it is today, to where all of this information, you can go to YouTube University and become a wholesale expert and listen to these calls. That wasn't there then. So, how did that wholesaling part start?
Yeah. We can talk kind of through how we got started in it and kind of what it looked like with that partner for the first. We were partners together for about 9 months before me and Annika went into business full time together. So we can kind of cover that and see. Yeah, and then we can go over kind of the first deal from there. I think that would give people an idea of what it looked like, how we started in real estate from knowing nothing to doing a little bit. I think it was important to mention that I was brought on because of a skill set that I had, and just because I was offered the opportunity to have 50% of the deals, I was only going to do like the one thing, and the one thing was cold outreach. So essentially, like the first few months of what our process looked like was, Drew was his name. Drew would pull a bunch of leads, get a Google spreadsheet ready for me, upload all the data, and then I'd wake up and I'd call all the data, and then I would basically funnel through who's pretty interested in this, and then when it came to time to get the contract signed and stuff, we'd kind of push him back to Drew, and he would take care of all the stuff, because he was just a few months ahead of where I was at, and it just made sense to have him do that. And then when it came time to find a buyer, we both kind of worked together in the sense that like I did all the screening and initial filtering of buyers as the responses came in, and then as he needed to meet people or let their contractors in, and again, like he lived next door to kind of where this property was. We can get into it's kind of a cool story. But that really allowed like us to kind of use each other where we could. So there was really no system where you're going to do this, I'm going to handle acquisitions, you're going to do dispositions. Like it was more so of my only skill set that I brought to the table was I didn't mind to get on the phones and talk to people. So he just made sure we were stacked up for that, and he kind of worked everything else. The tides turned where eventually, kind of I was doing a lot of the acquisitions and he was doing a lot of the like lead generation, and then I was doing a lot more of the disposition, but he was also had a little bit more capital than back then. Like I'm sure both of us would laugh at the capital we worked with there. I think we had like a $6,000 capital pool that he had to like pull out from the stock market for us to like do.
Oh yeah.
And it may have not, like, he'd have to tell it better than I would, but it wasn't much. Like it was like so little, but it was enough to get us into one of these deals. And then he put up like a bunch of the actual like sweat equity into the project and did a lot of the labor and stuff. So like we were using our skill sets back and forth. It's just eventually our skill sets kind of became the same, and then we had to kind of drift apart from there. But we're still on good terms today and stuff like that. We did a ton of other projects and JVs after that. But kind of going back to the first deal, whenever he had brought me on and I decided to do it full time, he'd already had a house under contract that he was set to sell and make like $8,000, I think, on the spread of it. And he said, that's fine, I'll give you 50% of basically all the other deals going forward, but this one, since I contracted it and I got it and stuff, I'm going to keep this one for his like proof of concept, his first deal to kind of do, because he hadn't done any other deals at this point either. And I was like, okay, that's cool, like no problem with me. So I tell my first deal story a little funny because the next deal that me and him did together was technically my first deal all the way from acquisition to disposition. However, nowadays, knowing what I know, that if someone just had a buyer and I had a contract and they brought me the buyer and then we closed on that deal, that would still be their first deal too. Like that would still be, just because they didn't acquire the deal under contract, they still had a buyer and they facilitated the buyer to the wholesaler and they joint ventured together and they got their first deal done through, whether you want to call it a bird dog or a finder's fee, or they had someone they could connect to, the wholesaler in this case, and make it happen. So while I was showing the other property that me and him had under contract, the second deal technically, I found a buyer that really wanted his first deal. So I connected him to that, and I was like, man, just give me like $500, you keep it, and you just give me $500 when he buys it, and like I'm good with that. So he was like, okay, cool. That buyer ended up buying that house and doing it. So looking back, like that was kind of technically my first deal, but I had to have the other one under contract and working it to even find that buyer to provide back to the first deal. So technically $500 was what I made on the first deal that I helped out on. But then the next one, we ended up actually selling it to his dad, who flipped it and did a burr on it, held as a rental. I think he sold it now. But it worked out really well. We had it at a pretty good price. The seller was like super particular because of his relationship with Drew's dad and stuff. That's why he wanted to sell it to us and work with us. So it ended up actually working out. We made $10,000 on that deal, and when we split it 50-50, so we made $5K. So within like the first 3 months, 2.5, 3 months, we had bought we had done 2 deals, and we had made $5,500 on it. So it wasn't like anything crazy, but it was enough to be like, oh, we can make money.
Yeah.
And we can actually do something here that's going to put money in the bank. I proceeded to spend all $5,000 of that to, not pretty much all of it, but the vast majority of it. Probably caught up on some bills, I think, with a little bit of it. But then I used the rest of it to pay my way into We Live 19, which was Wholesaling Live 19, put on by Max Maxwell in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
So this was 1 week after I got married. We made a little bit of money, got married, and then the next week I was like, hey, I'm going to go to Dallas with Drew, and we're going to learn more real estate stuff. We're going to meet people. We're going to really invest in ourselves and figure this thing out. And that's where I learned about creative finance, and then we kind of started with that, but it just kind of became a tool in the tool belt, like you hear a lot of people talk about. Yeah. And for us, that was kind of it. Though, made a little bit of money. We still had other cash deals under contract, but it was like, well, we need to figure this thing out for real. So that's where we bought our way into We Live 19 and kind of went from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So during that whole first year, I know you said you guys were partnered for 9 months. How many deals did you do during that time?
That's a good question. Compensated on and paid for, I think 5.
Okay.
It wasn't bad. It was kind of funny from the first few like wholesale deals. Then we had a creative flip that we did, and then he kind of as part of like our quote unquote buyout, there wasn't like an exchange of cash, but part of it, as I was able to keep certain things, he was able to keep the leads in the system that we were working through, and they did end up closing out and getting profit from them. So like I kind of got something from those in a different way, even though we were a part of it, but they were his completed deals and stuff. So 4 or 5 kind of depended on how you look at where we exited on the deal versus when they closed. But we had made somewhere like 45-50K in that time. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, that's proof of concept, and especially in that first year, as long as you have a little bit of money coming in, like that's the biggest thing. Like I remember my first flip, I made, going back through after really doing profit first for real estate investors, I'm like, oh, I only made 8 grand on that, but proof of concept.
Yeah.
Now the rest didn't go that way.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but just being able to get it done, say, hey, I could do this, and now we have a little consistency and to be able to scale up. So that's the beginning of the journey. Then you went into business for yourself and started, taking on some flips as well. So where does the story lead into that?
Yeah. So one of the things about Annika and I is that we are opposites to a T.
Yeah.
Like we did it the other day. Like the best way I can explain is that we were walking to the driveway and we were trying to time something for a Instagram video, and we're like, okay, we'll count to 3. And like she counts 1, 2, 3, and I count 3, 2, 1. Right. So like it's just that's the way our brains work.
Yeah.
Like in everything that's presented to us, we just look at it in polar opposites of one another. Going into business together, that was awesome because all the things that she hated doing, I love doing, and all the things I hated doing, she loved doing. For example, she doesn't want to raise money. She doesn't want to do outreach to people and sit down with people and convince them that our portfolio is so cool and our strategy is so awesome to raise money. But if I raise all this money and buy an asset and then give her the books and say like, hey, make it all make sense. So when we get, we either get audited or we have investors ask questions or whatever it may be, like we want to be like tick for tack with everything they have. We never want anything to be out of place, and I could never do that. I can never provide that to my clients, a super clean bookkeeping, accounting, cash flow charts, like paperwork, files, portals, all this stuff. Like I couldn't do that, but she loves that stuff, right? Like I love having conversations. She loves figuring out the systems and the processes to put it together. So it just kind of, like in the beginning, backing up to that, at the end of that 9 months, whenever I told Drew like, hey, I'm thinking about going to this with Annika, and again, like no ill will with him or anything. It was just a matter of it was easier to split profits with my wife, and me and Drew were doing a lot of the same stuff at this point.
Yeah, it's hard to have 2 integrators in a business.
Right, yeah.
Or 2 visionary integrators. So when you guys, and we went through the training in TCC, and Annika did a really good breakdown of visionary and integrator, and she's like, hey, this is how our business works. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. So whenever we go into business together, now someone needed to start doing all this data entry, and we manually skip traced every lead we had back then. We didn't have 18 cents a lead to skip trace anything. So she was sitting there doing all the data entry, setting up a lot of the what was, if you want to call it a CRM back there, it's just a Google spreadsheet back then. But like she was doing all she was doing all that stuff while I was just calling sellers all day and kind of working the system. So that just kind of morphed over the years into a much bigger system, but that was always kind of what made it make sense for us to do stuff. And then as we kind of got into the business, so this is September of 2019, we actually moved out to Colorado because we thought like, hey, as we get into our own thing and set it up ourselves, like I don't want to just make it seem like now I'm Drew's immediate competition right here in his backyard. And we liked the idea of setting up our life somewhere else. And we just got married 9 months ago, at this point, 6 months ago. So it was all just kind of fit into like, hey, we have a chance to just start a life somewhere else. And like, we didn't have any family ties or anything like that right there to the area. So it was, we don't have kids. Like it was pretty easy to make the decision after, a few long talks. And we decided Colorado was going to be it. So we go out there. We made, to kind of back our first creative finance deal. We find out about creative finance at that We Live 19 conference. Drew had to explain it to me like 7 times for me to get it. But then I went home and I locked myself in the room for like a week or 2. And I was like, I'm going to figure this thing out because this is cool. Like I don't have any credit or cash to go buy anything, like, but I can if I do this. And so I did that. And then 2 weeks later, I had found a good sub 2 opportunity. We bought it. Again, Drew did all the sweat equity side of it. Cost us like we had to borrow money, do all sorts of stuff. Like we had to like piece together $11,000 to pull this project off. And it was going to be like every connection we could possibly reach out to make it happen. And we netted like $35,000 on that flip and then got to split it. So like now we went from like making a little bit of money here or there with some wholesale deals to like making an actual check. And we were like, this is pretty cool. So that was a lot of our seed money plus a small installment from Annika's dad kind of got us going a little bit with like a $15,000 installment whenever it was kind of part of like her inheritance in a way that kind of got up front. She can kind of go into how that story looks. But essentially we had like $33,000 when we moved out to Colorado to kind of get going. Well, obviously setting up our life was kind of expensive. And then we did everything in the business that you shouldn't do. Like we bought these desks, these computers, these softwares, these dialers, got these staff or this type of staff. And like we were doing all this stuff and spending so much money because that's what we thought we had to do to make money, to be a business. Like we had to systemize all this crazy that we were doing before. And that was just wrong. We bought one house. Ended up losing a few $1,000s on it. I think we ended up losing like $6,000 all in. I sold that property whenever I came back to Charlotte after that Colorado stint. We lived in Colorado from September to March, by the way, which is the worst time ever to live in Colorado.
Oh, yeah, it's not warm out there, you
No,
mean?
yeah, we moved out there in just like the dead of winter.
Oh, yeah.
Snowed the whole time we were out there. We were doing real estate out there, but like we were spending all this money, then we had no money. So in the last few months, we were trying to just figure it out of like how do you get back, and like it all kind of ended up working out. But I came back and ended up selling that problematic property to Ed Pugh with CLT Buyers. I sold it to him. They helped me out a ton and kind of got me out of that jam, but I still lost like $6,000 on it. But I didn't care. Like, get me out of the mistake. Like, we clearly made a mistake. We got to revamp all this. COVID breaks out at this time. So I go back to being a roofer for a little bit. I go back to being a roofer. I just started a roofing job, which, by the way, roofing sales, you can make a killing in roofing sales. Again, I'm a big golfer. So after my 300th roof in the matter of like 120 days, I was like, you know what? I don't care how much money I can make up here. I'm going to fall and never play golf again. And, I'm probably good on that. So, I told the guys, look, this just probably isn't meshing well. I was like, I'm not built to be on the roofs. I was more from a sense of like, I mean, I care so much more about everything else than I do about making this $8,000 check on this roof. Like it,
Right.
and you can make some serious money selling roofs. So I say all that to say that like now I kind of did the roof things, trying to figure out what the market was doing, and then we get back into real estate. We were always kind of doing it, but just trying to stay in the loop, but we just didn't know what to do.
Right.
We were doing the business, trying to figure out. And I had this guy out in California named Matt, that he had a guy that was doing a lot of outreach for him, trying to find operators that wanted to do deals. And this guy called me like 10 times. He's like, dude, we'll pay for everything. Like, you just got to do it. And I'm like, all right, click. Call me again. Hey, man, we'll really pay for everything. You just got to do the work, click. Like, I'm just like, I'm hanging up on this guy and not responding to him for like months. And then eventually, and Alex Hermosi says this thing all the time. I'm a big Hermosi guy. And it got reminded to me last week during the session. It was like, if you have nothing, then you have no shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's impossible to be ashamed of anything that is nothing, right? And that was kind of the mindset that we had without thinking those words back then. Was I was like, yo, like, we're clearly right back in it where we started, 2 years ago. Like, what do we got to do that's different? And I was just like, fuck it. Like, we'll buy this house, right? Like, I had one, it met all the metrics. They said they were gonna fund it and do all this stuff, and I still didn't believe they were actually gonna write this check. But it was like, it's like a very small. It was like a $70,000 purchase, a $40,000 renovation. Like, it wasn't like a massive project by any means. But I was like, fuck it. Like, we'll see if they're the real deal.
Yeah.
They were. They really did. They really did send these checks, and we set it all up. And I paid a pretty hefty fee to have access to that capital. So essentially, I was doing all the work, getting all the loans in my name, going through all the process with their capital backing, and I only got 40% of the deal. So they essentially were 50-50 partners, but they got a preferred return on their capital and their interest in the deal.
Yeah.
And to be honest, even looking back now in same things, I didn't care. I was doing nothing. So 40% of that was 40% more of zero, right? So it was like it was kind of a no-brainer. So we did that, and we did 1 and 2 and 3 and 5 and 8, and like it kind of just kept going on and on. We were doing well, and now we were able to show other people that we could pull off some flips and stuff. So I was playing golf one day, and this kind of is the story of my life. I was playing golf one day, and I'm trying to figure out how to get money for this flip that would be pretty cool that I didn't want to do with the partnership anymore because I thought I could do it by myself. And I was just playing golf. And I told this guy, I was like, yeah, man, we got like these really cool strategies. Like, we can buy stuff like this. And he's like, oh, you mean like sub twos and seller finance? And like, this guy had never, like, I don't really know him like that, right? He's like, yeah, kind of exactly like that. He's like, oh, nice. I used to be a hard money lender. And I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, what do you do now? And he's like, well, now he's like he's a fund manager for a couple different hedge funds and stuff. And I was like, well, I need some money for a project. He's like, how much you need? I was like, I don't know. It's not much, man. Like maybe like 18 grand. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. And I was like, this guy knew some of my family, like growing up in the area and stuff like that. And that's the only reason that like I was even in the group with him, but was not the intent to raise money. It was just the intent to have more conversations with people.
Yeah.
Again, back to that genuine curiosity thing of like, I just kept asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually he just said, yeah. So that was how we raised our first money for a flip. And this is, what is this? This would have been 2021. Yeah, 2021, because we started with Matt, at the end of 2020, essentially. And then we were doing a bunch of JV projects all the way till about the end of 2021. And then that's when we started raising our own money and doing our own flips. But the whole process during that whole time was never to be a flipper. It was always that we were buying rentals and that we were going to use these capital partnerships to refinance out and use their credit and stuff to get in, because we had good enough credit to get into the deals like on hard money space, but we couldn't get quality refinances and stuff like that. So the whole idea was that we were going to hold these and then our partners were going to refi them out and we were just going to get a stay in them because we were getting 40% of the deal. And that was just Matt's program, and like luck and timing. There was no reason that should have worked, but Matt had $150 million sitting in a fund that he could spend,
Wow.
and he needed more people that were willing to do it, and I just got along well with the guy. Again, just genuine curiosity of how do you get $150 million, dude?
That's insane.
Yeah, so and the way that we were doing is basically we would do these projects, and then once we got completed and once I put tenants in them and they started to season, instead, because the market was appreciating so much and his capital pools were growing so much, we would actually package them together and sell them to these Japanese investment funds.
Wow.
And then they would buy like 4 or 5 as a package each time, and then I'd already got paid out after the tenant was in and the refi was done, but now he got a triple dip, quadruple dip on the deals, even being the lender, the partner, all this other stuff, and then package performing assets together and sell them to international investors that they didn't want to do any of that stuff. They wanted to buy stuff that was guaranteed. And we had some cool stuff. Like we were able to put up like all the rent rolls, all the debt, obviously all the financing terms, but we would put like before and afters of all the things that the project looked like and did. Like the pitch decks that they were giving them were like awesome, So like these guys were writing massive checks for these portfolios and they didn't care.
That's insane. Some of that COVID stuff, like a lot of the real estate investors now who have courses and stuff, it's like they were right in that 2021, 2022 range right after COVID where they made tons of money. And it's interesting to see now where some of those people are because they were just making so much and everything was working. And it sounds like that was a lot of the same story.
Yeah.
You had all the hustle and it's like, hey, perfect timing, and it just went up.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah, that was it. It really was luck and timing. It's funny because the more people I meet with money, the more conversations I have, a lot of their advice is, man, you just got to have a lot of luck and timing. And the way you get that is by putting yourself in the right room over and over again. And like eventually it will come true. But like there's nothing else you can do sometimes than just exist long enough.
Right.
You just have to exist long enough. That way you become inevitable, and like people will follow that. Like if you're just never not in the conversation, people eventually will be like, all right, how'd you get here? How'd you do this and stuff? And like that eventually becomes a cool space. But like, yeah, you gotta time that up pretty well with some lucky stuff to even have and that was us in a nutshell. But then yeah, kind of did all those JVs, sold a bunch of those. At this point we had probably done 30 projects or so, all in our career. And then from there it was kind of easy to just show stuff, and then people would keep writing checks. Yeah.
So, and then around this time, in the last couple of years, I know we talked about that you primarily focused on creative finance. So what pushed you to go directly into that? And then we can get into what you're doing today with the Continental Community.
Let's hit on why, because this is going to be important.
Yes.
People need to know that it was not all sunshines and rainbows. Like we had a very low point that we'll get into and show you why creative finance became what we do. And so we're doing all these flips. We're borrowing all this money. We got millions in debt, but we're supposed to be flipping all these houses and we're going to sell them. But like, obviously you're looking at one end of the debt is going way up and assets aren't selling. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Was that the rate hike?
Kinda, yeah. So essentially throughout all this period, I just smoked this mic.
Yeah.
So we're doing all these flips. We're selling everything that was supposed to be rentals that we're selling out as flips now because the market's appreciating. Like we're getting stuff that we were going 15K over budget, but the market appreciated, quote unquote. People were overpaying at that time 30K.
Yeah.
So what was a 15K overage on repairs was now a 15K gain because of the market conditions. So it was impossible not to liquidate stuff, but that was never the goal. It was always to hold, and it was just so hard to turn down a $20,000 check whenever you were making it. Like I tell people this all the time, like we were flipping a ton of houses and doing a lot of renovations and stuff, but we never really had money. It was just like, sure, the accounts had money in them, but like you never really had money because like there was always something going over on this project and something over here. And one of the things people don't tell you whenever you raise money and do your own projects without capital partners from California, is that you got to pay for all those overages yourself, and you got to find other money and how you're going to pay those people back on closings and all this. So like it becomes kind of a mess, and eventually the rates change and rates go up to 6, 7, 8% there, and no houses that were, even if they were worth, and this is my opinion on ARVs for anyone that would care, if a house is worth 400,000, it doesn't mean that just because someone buys it today for 375 because it sat on market for 90 days and then they bought it, that it's less than 400K in my opinion. It's still a $400,000 property. The buying power in which retail buyers or investors had at that time only justified a $375,000 value of the property.
Sure.
So on paper and bank standards, you have to agree with the valuations, right? It's 375. But the actual, as soon as market conditions change, like overnight, if rates went below 4, that's now a $415,000 house. So you kind of had to weigh back and forth to these things. Like as rates change, were my houses really worth less, or was the buying power so limited that they were making offers based on their buying power, not what properties were worth? And there's a lot to say that that's just how the market works in general, but that's kind of a shitty way to view like exits as a flip and saying like, I'm going to lose 25K because the government's doing something stupid, like that's just tough. So
you're
for
at
us,
mercy of the market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you can't do anything about it. So this all happened. Holding costs started stacking up. Flips started not selling. Like for instance, my primary residence is the perfect example. It was a 3-acre property, all fenced in, gated. We gutted the whole house, redid everything, appraised for 435. I had 315K all into it, set to make a great amount on the flip. Not one offer. We listed at 439 and we price cut for 6 months with no offers. And we were all the way down to like 369. And eventually I just told my agent, I was like, dude, I'll buy it. I was like, I'll buy it. Funny enough, I called that same guy, Matt from California. I was like, hey man, I need some other money, but for like me and my house and do so. So we reworked everything, and he was my lender on that house. But it was to the point of like, like, what do you want me to do? Like, I can show you all day long that this has money, it has equity, like everything's tick for tack going to work out, but I have no idea how long it's going to take. And I was like, this is dumb. And then at this point, so this is now like March of 23, and everything's just going downhill at this point. None of the flips are selling. We're having to spend all the money that we had like on holding costs, and it was just kind of a mess. And we essentially had like nothing left come like May of 2023, and we were done with the flips. We had sold everything off and restructured, but we had nothing left, and we kind of had to figure out how we were going to get back to square one. And for us, it was wholesaling. We just went right back to wholesaling. So we had a sales rep that we had hired. He did pretty well for us. We generated like 75K in fees over the next few months, and that kind of reset us going into like August, September-ish of 2023. But then we had a long conversation with ourselves of like no more short-term capital. We had raised millions in 25 to 100K increments, but they were always 6 to 12 month loans, right? And that's just the bottlenecks and the timelines on it. I hated it. So part of one of the things I did as part of my capital raising efforts is going back to that other guy that we had did some other deals with in the very beginning. We had made him money. He had sent us checks. We'd sent him back with profits, and then just one night left me high and dry at the closing table saying I wasn't going to fund it. Wow. I'm over here like, man, I'm making you a killing. You're making like 15% every 3 months on your money, like with me. And we were paying like guaranteed returns on the 15%. So not like just 1% every month or 1.25%. So this guy's killing it. And then he just up and stops. So I kind of went to our team, and I was like, hey man, like, how do I make sure that I have control over the capital, but they still feel safe that it's not just being spewed everywhere, right? So that's where we created these master promissory notes, where we essentially put all the money into a trust account. We have a master note that dictates the terms in which I can spend the money. But they get as long as they want to verify me, my portfolio, my teams, to do all their due diligence on us. But I'm pretty upfront with capital partners. I tell them, hey, I'm not going to spend a time, or I'm not going to spend a second of my time or my team's time finding you an opportunity until I know you have the money, because I've been left at the altar too many times from capital partners that you're going to have to go and put it up. I know you have it. It's protected. At any time that you want to pull out, you can pull out, as long as we haven't spent the money yet. We had a lot of opportunities, so we usually spent the money pretty quickly, but it was a fail safe for us to know, like, hey, I got to be the one that can decide when we spend this money.
For sure.
So I say all that to say that, so we got into flipping indirectly, got out of that, and so now we're like, okay, we want long-term capital partners. I want to have the control over the money, and I just want to buy awesome assets, because we had just got done that period of time. Plus, we were wholesaling still the whole time. We were wholesaling creative deals out because I was good at locking up creative deals, and people were making a killing off them. They were walking into like 20 or 30K in equity, like 2.5% debts. They were paying me like $5,000 for the deal. And it was eventually conversations that I went back to my capital lenders with at this time instead of partners. And I was like, hey, look, I'm making other people a lot of money. Why don't you just give me your money for the next 5 years and I'll double it? And that was always been kind of our pitch to capital partners is I'll double your money every 5 years. It essentially equates to a 20% return year over year. And we can do that through cash flow and appreciation. So I was like, if you guys can just trust me for the 5 years, and it's going to be hard because we've never done anything over 6 to 12 months, but we have awesome buy and hold opportunities, and I'm not flipping anymore. I'm not getting back into it. I'm not doing this active income thing, like, which is funny because all rental properties I still feel like are active income.
It's all active income.
Yeah.
None of this stuff is passive.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing passive. Yeah. So that was us, and was like, man, I'll shift my entire dynamic to be like, hey, we understand creative deals. Like we've done wholesaled a lot of them, taken down a lot of them as a acquisition strategy for flips, but never for like long-term holds. And it was like, let's do that now. Let's make it all long-term holds with super cheap debt. And our baseline is always the debt and the appreciation cannot be the same. So if I get a 3% debt, but I have 4.5% appreciation in the market, my entire pitch to the investors is, hey, if we just pay our bills every month, we will make money. This means nothing of tenant income or other revenue or short-term models or mid-term rental models, like any other exit that we could do. Let's just say we held it vacant for 5 years and just paid our debt.
Yeah.
We're outweighing it based on appreciation year in and year out. So like that's still a win, you know?
For sure.
And so we're looking at like our ultimate fail safes are the fixed debt, right? And then the balloons that we set for any of the seller equity and stuff. But that just kind of became our number one MO for the next 2 years after that. Up until pretty much about now, where I don't really care how many I get now. Not because like we have a ton of them, just more in the sense that it's not my main focus. TCC is,
For
and like
sure.
buying more rentals just creates more work for the rest of my team that is understaffed.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, and I've definitely got to get you back on another episode where we really break down some of that creative finance because, like, we know the stuff that's out there with Pace Morby, tons of other people are doing it, but actually the nitty gritty, because that's where people kind of go wrong. They see all this stuff on YouTube, but they don't know how to implement it. They don't have somebody sitting right there saying, "Hey, this is what you got to do." They come to you with the deal. What do I do? And you're able to piece that together for them because it's really just this big puzzle. You just got to figure out where the pieces fit.
Yeah.
But I want to jump into the last part here before we hop off.
Mm-hmm.
What is the Continental Community?
Sure, yeah. So the Continental Community is a full-service real estate consulting firm. What that looks like is that we brought the core elements of every deal that all of us encounter inside of one building. So where we operate in South and North Carolina, we have the same 4 common denominators in every deal that we do. So we have legal, we got to have attorneys that are closing these deals. You're going to have money in some capacity to fund them. And you're going to have to do the work. Someone is. You're going to have to manage the property managers. You may self-manage the assets. You may manage the contractors. You may have to manage the GC who manages all the subs. There's someone that has to do something with the asset. They have to initiate the tax filings and all that stuff. But then also the final layer being taxes is that Uncle Sam's going to try and get a piece of everything that we do. We're constantly paying property taxes on properties. We're constantly moving escrow things. And like there's a lot of stuff on the actual end of the year strategy and planning with taxes that are a part of your in real time acquisitions. So we wanted to make this a cohesive environment where when someone has an asset, an acquisition, a disposition, a business acquisition, whatever it may be, we wanted to bring everybody in one building so that they could cohesively create a plan for them. Because one of our advantages and other people's disadvantages is, again, communication. Being able to effectively communicate what you're trying to do across all your pillars within your portfolio for a singular result. And it was really easy because I had great teams to just pick up the phone and get legal advice and get operations advice and get tax advice and to get funding advice. How could I figure out a way to monetize this back for everyone else and basically advance them further in our relationships? So that's what the TCC does. We essentially have 2 two offer stacks where people can come in and they can buy a blueprint for $8.99, and we'll basically build them out a custom plan based on their goals and their roadblocks to how they can achieve certain things. The other side is they can come in as a full teammate like yourself. That's $10,000 a year, but they get unlimited counsel on all four pillars. So it wouldn't matter if they wanted to come in and sit there with legal for 8 hours to game plan this crazy litigation suit that they may have coming up. That's included,
Mm-hmm.
right? They may want to sit there and build out a super comprehensive tax plan in combination with their estate plan that legal's building out. That's all included. So anytime they're working on a deal, like this past week, we helped on a seller walkthrough and seller negotiations with one that was close to us, and like it was little things like that's what we're available for at all times. So that way, when people make decisions, they don't have to look elsewhere. They have an entire team that knows what they're up against, what their goals are, the strategy that they put together. So now when legal makes a decision or tax makes a decision or ops or funding or whatever it may be, they're doing it in a cohesive manner for the betterment of that person's portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was my unfair advantage being able, like, especially in creative finance, because you hit on it earlier. There's just so many nuances of do this or do this or do that. And for us, it was, well, I don't have to worry about that. I just make a phone call and I'll have it all within 10 minutes. Like
Yeah.
that was our unfair advantage. No one else, people were having to wait weeks for the same information. I could contract the properties and close on them by the time that their attorneys and CPAs would respond, and good luck getting those guys on the phone together to give you advice. Like one of the things I tell Ryan with Sperry and Hatley, who does a lot of ours, is I was like, man, I will tell the people the words that you want me to, but they won't mean the same thing. So by having someone that will get on the phone with your accountants, having someone that will get on the phone with your private money people and talk them through these things from a licensed professional standpoint versus just the guy that's asking for all their money,
Yeah.
like that's a much better look than anything else. People can't do that. They can't just, like, it costs people tens of thousands of dollars a year to have those people on retainer. And even when they have them on retainer, they're not on demand be able to pick them up. So we wanted to create an environment where people could push themselves 7 years into my relationships and have those people to call and bring into their problems every day and say, hey, this is what I got going on. What do you want me to do? But that's kind of the core model with it all. And then going into 2026, we're taking a big approach on business owners. So we have a core offer that we're rolling out to all small business owners and basically anyone that's doing 8 figures or less in top line revenue, to say, hey, we will grow your net worth through real estate while you pay $0 in taxes, or I'll give you your money back. And that essentially is just to say, hey, if you do what I say to do and you buy the houses I tell you to buy, and our accountants run the books on them, and you structure it the way that we need to, I can guarantee you won't pay taxes. You have to spend the money and you have to buy the assets, but I can guarantee you won't pay taxes on it. And that's just part of our strategy that we're building out for business owners, because one of the things that we did within TCC is that we went back to our investment firm, Sutton Systems, and reverse engineered like our last 30 deals. And I said, hey, who is on all these deals? And it was almost always business owners and W-2 folks, high income W-2 earners, and people that had no time to invest in real estate themselves because their HVAC company was making $1 million a year, So that's kind of where we found our bread and butter with that offer, to say, hey, we are a full service consulting firm for agents, investors, to help instill confidence in the deals, sellers, negotiations, private money lenders, all that, because that's what they were there for me. But the core of our offer going into 26 is to eliminate taxes for business owners and grow their net worth at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've definitely got a ton of value with the legal issues I've been through, and we've closed a couple deals in TCC already. So definitely tremendous value for anybody that's looking to get into it, because one of the big things, like when I was listening back to Bigger Pockets, they talk about, what's your core team? And, it's, finding the deals and this, but then they talk about, oh, well, you need a tax and you need a legal team and you need operations. And that's where people get stuck, especially the overthinkers, because they think they have to go out and get all these things done before they start. But, with what TCC is doing, you have it all under one roof. So it, takes all of that out. You have trainings to where you can come in and, pick the brain of the guys who do this every single day and be around the people. And I mean, it's such a tremendous value that you guys are putting together. So yeah, super excited to watch that grow and be a part of that. And, if you ever want to reach out to Justin and the Continental Community, I'll make sure to link all of their information down below in the podcast description with all of Justin's information. Let them know that you listen to the podcast and got some value out of this. But Justin, thank you so much for being on. This has been great. We're definitely going to have to get you back on and talk some creative finance and, wholesale strategies.
Yeah.
I think people get a ton of value from that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'd love to come back and do one like specifically on like creative finance and capital, because I think that's one that people don't understand how to place long-term capital into creative deals and how to structure it. That's beneficial for you and the capital partners and stuff. So I think that'd be a great episode to dive into. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. So thank you so much for being on.
For having me.
Pumped to have you. And this has been Justin and Chris on the Leadway Wealth Builders Podcast.